Rishi Sunak has given an half-hour election interview to the BBC. It wasn't incredibly interesting. I watched it all. I'm not going to show you that much of it. It did end, though, with this rather telling question.
I want to close by asking you whether you really think the Conservatives deserve another 5 years in power. Many viewers have told us, they've got in touch with the BBC and says, nothing works in this country. You can't get a GP appointment. You can't get to dentist. You can't afford somewhere to live. The trains don't run on time. Sewage get pumped into the rivers and the sea. Why do you deserve another chance?
Well, we haven't got time to go over all the things of the last 14 years. I point out one thing which you failed to mention on your list. Thanks to the Conservative education reforms, our children in this country are not just the best readers in the UK, they're the best readers in the Western world. We've transformed possibilities for young people because of our education reforms, but this election is about the future. And we have been through a tough few years, that's undeniable, but I believe we've turned the corner now. And this election is about building on the progress that we've made, delivering a secure future for everyone, where their taxes are cut, their pensions are protected, migration is coming down, and we get to net zero in a more sensible way. That's what I offer at this election. I'm prepared to take bold action. I've got a clear plan to deliver that. And in contrast, Labour Party are asking for a blank cheque. They won't tell you what they're going to spend it on, and they won't tell you which of your taxes are going to go up to pay for it. And that is the choice at this election.
After 14 years, 5 prime ministers, Boris Johnson lying about parties, Liz Truss almost crashing the economy, and you bunking off D-Day, after all the broken promises, you really think you deserve another chance?
I've been very clear in the past, no government gets everything right, but I am proud of what has been achieved over 14 years. This election is also about the future. We have a clear plan. I'm prepared to take bold action to cut people's taxes, protect their pensions, and bring migration down. And in contrast, Labour are just going to put everyone's taxes up. That's a choice.
This election is not about the future, right? If you have been, I mean, in most areas of life, right, the best way you can predict the future is by looking at the past. If someone is constantly rude to you and swears at you whenever they see you, they're probably going to do that in the future. If whenever you ask someone to do something, they don't do it, probably in the future they also won't do it when you ask them. This is sort of it's the law of inference, actually. And this is also how electorates behave, and they're quite right to, right? If you're an electorate, you're trying to judge a government, you're saying, do we want them to continue their job? Now, you don't say, okay, they've been a complete disaster for 14 years, but maybe they'll change. Maybe they'll change. The definition of madness is to keep doing the same thing and expecting there to be a different result. Why would we, as the British public, say, well, maybe this time when we vote Conservative, it's all going to be okay? So it's not a very strong position to fight an election from. And Nick Robinson, to be fair to him, his question there was pretty spot on. And I do think that exchange explains why the Tories are doing quite so terribly in this election. And in fact, as a number of commentators have now said, what we're living through is barely an election and more a punishment beating. And however out of touch they might seem, this is something the Tories do seem to understand. There are not many things they understand. This is one of them. And so their campaign strategy has taken an interesting turn. This is a new advert the Conservatives are pushing out on Facebook.
Keir Starmer needs you. He's had 4 years to tell you his plan. Has he got one? Or is he hiding it from you? The more votes for Reform, the Liberal Democrats or anyone else, will hand Labour 100 extra seats, giving Keir Starmer the largest majority Labour have ever had. With Reform still winning no seats at all, with the Lib Dems on board with everything Keir Starmer wants to do, a vote for Reform or the Lib Dems means you'll have no one holding Keir Starmer to account on your behalf. This means you'll be handing him a blank cheque to spend on anything he wants with no control over what it'll cost you. Are you sure that's what you want to vote for? More taxes and borrowing? Leaving our children with more debt? More of your money going to benefits while you and your family go to work? Don't risk it. Vote Conservative.
The Tories seem to have accepted that they are going to lose this election. They're saying, do you want Keir Starmer to have an opposition in Parliament? Then vote Conservative. Very strange thing for an incumbent party to be saying.
Strange thing for an incumbent party, strange thing for, what is often described as the most successful party in the Western world in the last sort of 200 years or so. They governed this country for most of that period of time. It's quite a moment for them to be dragged to something like this. But I think they realise, because how could you not realise that from the off in this election, they were on the back foot. Presumably Rishi Sunak called it on the grounds that the economic news wasn't really going to get any better from this point onwards. It still looks like a mad decision, and as I know there's a lot of his own colleagues certainly feel the same, possibly soon to be ex-colleagues, certainly feel similarly about that. But they knew they were in a bad place from this point. And their campaign has, if it's targeted anything at all, has been going at whatever is left of their core vote, and you just chase and chase and chase after that. National Service stuff did nothing other. Nothing other for anybody, on paper, a serious proposal. And by the way, there's quite a sinister, if you actually look seriously at what they're proposing, let's create every year an army of 30,000 volunteers schooled in British values. Seems a little bit like, hang on, that's something else than national service. But it's there to appeal to the core vote. Same thing with the pensions, as you talked about. Same thing now with the big handout the tax cut for the self-employed. By the way, the self-employed aren't really a core Tory vote anymore and haven't been for some period of time. And that's fairly obvious. But nonetheless, this is where they're going with this. It's a core vote strategy. I remember Ed Miliband described in 2015 as having a 35% strategy. That's what they needed to get to win. The Tories have something more like a 30% strategy. On current polling, which I know we're going to get onto, they'll be lucky to get even that.
We're going to look at a YouGov poll. It dropped late this afternoon. Pretty dramatic, really. The Labour Party on 38%, so they've been up. That's actually lower than they have been in a while, but still very much a comfortable lead. The big one, though, the Conservatives on 18%, down 1. Reform on 17%, so up 1. So Reform 1 point away from the Conservatives, and the Conservatives so far down on 18 for a governing party. Also of interest there, the Lib Dems are up 4 on 15, so they're doing quite well. And potentially that's because this field work. So when they asked people who they wanted to vote for, the Lib Dems were in the news a lot because of their manifesto. Might also be because people think that Ed Davey looks like a kind of fun guy when he's always falling into the water. And he did do that very moving video, really, about his son and his mother and sort of caring for them. And then the Greens on 8%, up 1. James, though, it's that sort of closeness, the Conservatives and Reform, that's really going to terrify Rishi Sunak. I think YouGov has them sort of closer than other polls. If we'd be in a completely different situation, if all the polls were showing Reform above the Conservatives, then who could guess what would happen? But this is already scary enough for the Tories, isn't it?
Scary enough for Tories, and something that, as we saw Nigel Farage openly sort of saying he wants to see happen. This is their target, that they want to overtake the Conservatives. It's our own sort of crappy British version of the Italian sorpasso. This moment in the 1970s when the Communist Party was going to overtake the Christian Democrats, the Italian Conservative Party, if you like. It never quite happened. But yeah, we got a version of that. Will Reform, these brave upstarts, overtake the most successful party in the Western world for the vote? Look, as you said, it's not really matched by the other pollsters out there. It's also not kind of matched by a sort of gut feeling on this, which is that just how the electoral system works and how people adapt their votes because of how the electoral system works. And the Tories pushing a message that, you really do need to vote Conservative, stop Labour. You think that's going to get squeezed. Certainly, if we do end up with anything like that, the results will go wild. If you put this into a first past the post system, it sort of really starts to distort who gets what representation in Parliament. Reform aren't going to get 18% or anything like the number of MPs, and who knows where various Tory MPs will go to and which Tory seats will switch in which direction from that. So it could be incredibly chaotic underneath the big headline of Labour winning. But as I said, I'm slightly sceptical about the complete Tory wipeout kind of scenario that we might be looking at here.
Normally at this sort of stage in the election, you would expect to start to see sort of a closing of the polls between the two main parties, because people do begin to recognise, oh, okay, we live in a two-party system. If we want to keep out the other guys, we're going to have to vote for, the people who we're less scared of. And I suppose Keir Starmer and the people around him would say their big achievement in this election and over the past 4 years is that doesn't seem to really be happening. There aren't many people, it seems. The Tories are trying to increase the number of people like this, but it doesn't seem like there are many people who are saying, look, I hate Rishi Sunak, but I'm not going to waste my vote on Reform because I'm too terrified about that extremist Keir Starmer becoming Prime Minister. we can't read people's minds. Maybe things will change. But at the moment, it doesn't seem like there are going to be that many people driven to the polls because they're terrified of Keir Starmer. And obviously, whatever you thought about him, I think he had some great policies. Many people did go to the polls because they were scared of Jeremy Corbyn.
And they went to the polls because they wanted to vote for Jeremy Corbyn. I mean, look, turnout was up in the last couple of elections. Turnout was well up for the Brexit referendum. And this was like one of the all-time highs in terms of national polls of any description for a long period of time. I mean, basically, turnout fell off a cliff after 1997 and has barely recovered in the last few elections. What I think is going to happen this time round, and this, by the way, also accounts for some of the volatility in the polling, is that there are very large numbers of people who are still saying don't know, haven't decided, won't vote, and the various pollsters don't entirely know what to do with them. So you get, beneath the headline of Labour's doing well, you get a lot of churn amongst all the other parties as different pollsters apply different methods to working out what to do with a whole bunch of people who are so disaffected they don't want to vote. And I would be astonished if turnout gets anything like as high as we saw in the last couple of general elections.
Yeah, turnout will be very interesting at this one. I'd always imagined the 1997 election as having high turnout, but it was actually a lot lower than 1992. Tony Blair was a lot more popular than Keir Starmer. He was about plus 20 in the rankings, whereas Starmer is minus 20. So to be this far ahead in the polls while no one really likes you that much is interesting.